Welcome to the Body Smart Podcast, where we remove roadblocks to fitness and health to empower you to master your health habits. We help you become Body Smart.
Hi, and welcome to the Body Smart Podcast. We're excited to have Cody Barnett here with us. He's with Bodyworx Physical Therapy. He's in Kansas, and he has a special concussion program that he's developed for helping kids stay safe. And we know as parents, that's a huge thing for us. So we want to welcome in Cody. Cody, give us a little bit of a rundown on kind of how you got to what you're doing.
Hey, everybody. First, thanks, Cameron, for letting me come on. I appreciate the opportunity and hope you and your listeners find this beneficial and helpful. So thank you. So I've been a physical therapist since about 1991, and I am from your neck of the woods. I'm from Ogden, and went to Weber State there for about 3 years, and then came to Wichita State. I left WSU and came to WSU.
Oh, yeah.
Left Weber State University and came to Wichita State University for physical therapy and graduated in 1991. And I've had a outpatient physical therapy orthopedic practice for several years. And about 4 or 5 years ago, really wanted to do something about the epidemic of concussions and the bad symptoms that occur from concussions, and that's what prompted us to start doing the research and set up a program.
Yeah.
Kind of the backstory is as a kid growing up, I was a big Pittsburgh Steelers fan from the 70s, and as you may know, a lot of the early research was from Pittsburgh area.
Yeah.
And some of the old Steelers actually, unfortunately, committed suicide. And, these are the guys I grew up watching play sports as a kid. And it just literally broke my heart. I said, I don't want the people in my community to, the kids I see and the people I see to have to deal with this later in life. And I want to keep all my patients healthy and happy and living long, productive lives. So
Absolutely.
That prompted us to get going on it. And so what brought us to this point basically is we went out and researched and looked at all of the best testing options that are out there and kind of tried to package all of the things that we found that were the best and kind of bring that all together under one roof. And that's what's led us to our concussion testing program that we have.
Okay. So when you say concussion testing, do you do like baseline testing with some athletes too to test beforehand even? I know that's becoming a newer thing.
Yeah, that's actually huge. So we really do three things. One, we do, as you're talking about, we do the baseline testing. And so baseline test, think of it as kind of like your yearly physical, right?
Yeah.
And so if we do that baseline test, preferably for kids, let's say we're talking, between 11 and say 22, 23 years old, we really prefer to do that once a year because our brain continues to change up until we're about 23, 24 years old.
Right.
And so if we have a baseline test, our goal is that we never have to use that information.
Right. Absolutely.
If I do a baseline test on you, I hope I never have to use the information. But if we do have a baseline test and you should get injured and we're trying to make decisions as far as going back to school or going back to sports, how do we know that you are recovered or not? And so we look back at that baseline test, and that gives us the information that we need to try to make better decisions on returning to play or just returning to classroom and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that we do is post-injury testing. So if you've had an injury, something that has been a blow to the head or you're having concussion type symptoms, then we do post-injury testing. And then the third part of it is basically the rehab part, which is, let's face it, is really the most important part. So how do we get people to recover faster so that they're not still having headaches, they're not still dizzy, they're able to concentrate, they're able to read, all of those things. So the rehab part of it is really huge.
Yeah. And so in a past life, I worked at the University of Utah in our neurological unit, so our outpatient stroke, brain injury, and spinal cord injury unit. And it was always amazing to me by how much a concussion affected so many factors in people's lives, right? And not just, feeling a little off for a while or kind of getting their bell rung like people like to say with sports, but it affects the way they feel, their sensitivity to light, and so many other things for weeks, sometimes years. And
Yep.
so what a great thing to be able to make sure that people are healthy before returning to sport. That's been such a big thing, I guess, in the popularity of football. Sounds like you're a football fan.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a great thing to mention is when I talk about stuff like this, people immediately think I'm anti-football or anti-whatever. It can be farther from the truth. I love sports. I love keeping people mobile and active, and I want people doing sports. And I want my son played several years of football.
Yeah.
It's not that we dislike those sports. It's all about, okay, how do we just make things safer so that we can do them,
Yeah, so my oldest son has started playing football as well, and my wife has some heartburn. There's the movie Concussion and some other things, and I get a lot of, should people even be playing football anymore? And that's maybe a question for you. It sounds like you're of the opinion that it's still okay. We just have to be safe.
Well, here's something for you, Cameron. So in terms of the percentages of people that I treat, I do see a fair number of middle school, high school kids and athletes. Sure. But by the same token, at least probably a third of my patients are adults.
Yeah.
Guess how they got hurt?
Car accidents or ball? Yeah.
Car accidents, yeah. So if we outlaw football, we better outlaw our car.
Right. Absolutely.
There's risk there as well. So, we realize that with every sport, there's some risk, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, anything that you do, even as a runner, there's risks there. So, it's all about, how do we minimize the risk and there are risks and there are injuries.
Definitely.
How do we minimize those and how do we make things as safe as we can?
And yeah, like you said, I think we should be doing that in just about every sport or activity. CrossFit's very popular, but there's some risks there. We should, try to keep people healthy, active, and moving, but make it as safe as possible so that people can still do the things that are fun for them to stay active.
Exactly.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So tell us some of your more notable stories about patient concussions that kind of tell your story a little bit.
Sure. Great question there, Cameron. So I'll give you, if you don't mind, I'll give you two stories that are both different, but give some different perspective. One was a young man that I saw recently. He's 13. He had been injured from football about a year and a half before I started seeing him.
Wow.
And it had a couple of injuries pretty close to each other. And so his mom is actually a physical therapist. And they brought him in, and we did find some deficits in our testing. And really within about 2 weeks, we started him we base our treatment program based on the symptoms that we see in the testing. And that treatment program may be different depending on the person and their symptoms, right?
Yeah.
So it's not really a cookie cutter deal. It depends on what areas of the brain are being affected. So anyway, this young man, within 2 weeks, he was already starting to see some good improvement in his headaches and his vision issues, and he had some balance issues were all getting better. And within, say, 2 to 4 weeks, his mom says to me, and this, it's one of those things that's really very humbling. His mom says to me, "I think I have my son back."
Oh yeah.
I think I've got my son back, and basically his personality had become he went from this happy-go-lucky, fun-loving, joking kid to this kid that was much more introverted and he just wasn't being himself. And so, when you have a mom say that to you, about brings tears to your eyes. And
absolutely,
this is really cool. I'm glad we're doing this. So, anyway, long story short, so within about I'm gonna guess it was about 3 months or so, he was doing substantially better. He played on the tennis team. He made the decision that he didn't want to play football.
Okay.
But that was his choice. And he's doing really well today. He's doing great.
That's awesome.
So yeah, that's a really neat story. Another one is kind of the other perspective, which is the non-sports injury, the motor vehicle accident.
Yeah.
And, this gentleman had a office job that was pretty intense, a lot of high pressure, high level type stuff that he had to do. And he'd been having a lot of headaches, neck pain, difficulty reading. This is a guy that has to do a lot of reading on the computer and reading on paper. And he basically had just decided that, this is how it's going to be.
Yeah.
And he's a motivated enough guy that he was just plowing through it,
Oh, man.
And he's, 45-ish, something like that, maybe.
Right.
Anyway, long story short, we did a lot of manual therapy, things for his neck, get his neck calmed down. We did some vision things to help his vision. Literally within a month, he's reading his computer. He's doing his projects without headaches.
That's huge.
He'd been suffering with this for a year. So, it's just really gratifying and really humbling, to be able to help people overcome that. And
yeah,
pretty neat to see.
Do you find that people are surprised when physical therapists are the answer for concussion recovery?
I don't think they're surprised that they find that we can help them, but I think it's been a challenge getting the word out there that there's help.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of people that say, well, I guess I've got to take these drugs for the rest of my life, or I guess I just have to suffer with headaches for the rest of my life. And so the difficult part is just getting the word out.
Yeah, definitely. There's something that they can do, that they don't have to live with it. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. I find that with certain things that we do in the clinic, it's like, well, I never knew that I could get help for that. Dizziness or balance issues, things like that. It's like, I wish we could get that message out there to the broader public more quickly so that they could get that relief. And so it's awesome that with concussions, you're doing that in your community. So with that, then what are some of the misconceptions that people have about concussions?
Yeah, great question. So one is like MRI and CT. So your doctor might order an MRI or a CT, and these are good things. But they're really to rule out bleeding in your brain.
Right.
There really is no definitive test that you can say, okay, this is a concussion, because we can't see those injured neurons in the brain. You just can't see them.
Right.
The testing we do is really evaluating the function of how your brain is working. And we can say, yes, you've got concussion symptoms, and we think this is what's going on. But there's really no definitive test, like you take a blood test or anything like that. There are some neat technologies that are on the horizon where we might be able to do that. But at least right now, there's no one test. So like MRI, CT won't really tell you if you've had a concussion.
No, yeah.
They tell us if we've got some bleeding in our brain. So that's one misconception. Another is people think you have to take a whack to the head to have a concussion.
Right.
And even people that just take a hard spill where their head gets whipped back and forth really quickly. And as our brain literally sits in a cushion of fluid. And as our brain gets moved back and forth in that cushion of fluid, you can develop a concussion from the brain just sloshing. Sloshing is kind of a strong word, but kind of getting sloshed back and forth inside our brain bucket and can cause an injury even without a blow to the head.
Right.
So those are probably the two most common that I run into.
Right. And that reminds me of a friend that I was just talking to, how he had a concussion that really affected him at work for about 3 months, he said. And it was from a water skiing accident, and he didn't feel like his head necessarily got hit. He just was going fast. He water skis competitively and just kind of took a tumble, but didn't necessarily know neck trauma or anything like that, but was just not right at work for a while, couldn't read, had a hard time, felt very fatigued, dizzy sometimes, and didn't know where it was really coming from, but finally realized, I've had a concussion.
Yeah.
And so interesting that's a common misconception, because it definitely, those are all signs and symptoms of concussion that don't necessarily come from a blow to the head.
Yeah, absolutely. And, people always make a big deal about football, and certainly footballs are high risk, but, we get all kinds of sports. I've had swimmers get kicked in the head at a swim meet. We've had people water ski. I've had water skiers. Obviously we talked about the car accidents, but there's it's just a myriad of ways that people get injured.
cyclists, gymnasts, all kinds of things. Yeah. Anything where you're being active, you have a risk of falling and
Yep.
jarring something or hitting your head. So as a parent, that it's kind of that nervous thing of, uh-oh, my kids just had a concussion. I have a family of 4 boys, and so we've had a couple.
Yeah.
Usually some horseplay involved with that. Just kids being young boys. But so the panic or the fear is when something happens, okay, what do I now do for a concussion? When they're having kind of these symptoms where I think, uh-oh, they might have a concussion. What should we then do?
Yeah. So the very first thing is if there's any kind of suspicion at all, if you're in the middle of an event, in the middle of a game, or in the middle of an activity, if there's any suspicion at all, it's just better to come out of the game.
Right.
Okay. And you might say, it's really conservative, and it's a state championship, and et cetera.
Yeah.
But there's a thing called second impact syndrome, and if you suffer a second concussion before you've recovered from the first one, your incidence of increased symptoms, cognitive trouble, and other problems down the road is just so much higher, like exponentially higher. And so we always I always talk to my patients about risk versus reward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a situation where our risk is super high and the reward, not quite as much. And so if there's ever any doubt, any suspicion, the first thing is you really need to come out,
Mm-hmm.
So that would be number one. If it's, say, after the event or, a day later or whatever, and you're starting to have let's say you're having some fogginess or some dizziness or difficulty reading, sensitivity to light, sensitivity to sound, things like that, then the first step is we need to get you to a medical professional.
Right.
So that can be your family physician. It can be, somebody that treats concussions for a living. But the bottom line is you need to get some medical care.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So obviously we work a lot with our family physicians. We recommend people utilize their family physician, and let's make sure that everything is neurologically sound and they're doing well and stable and there's nothing at high risk there. And so that would be number one. The other is if let's say it's in the evening and you can't get to the doctor's office till the next day, then just generally trying to avoid things like a lot of screen time, like video games or television.
Things with a lot of stimulus, essentially.
Lots of stuff going on, right?
Yeah.
So trying to just back off of some of that and just decrease our activity level and decrease our stimulus level.
Mm.
But then, next morning, let's get you into your family doc. Let's you get you evaluated there.
Okay.
And then if you have something like, what we do in your community, that would be the next step is, okay, let's start doing some of that testing that we talked about.
Right.
Let's see where we stand and see where your symptoms are at.
Yeah. So like I mentioned, we've had a couple of different concussions just from kids being kids. And one thing that I established with my kids was I gave them each 3 words. So almost like a baseline test, 3 words to remember. So one of them with one of my kids who seems to lead his life with his head. He runs into stuff with his head all the time. So his words are Lego, book, and cheese.
Okay.
So that's something that I'll periodically do. Like, what are your 3 words? When I think that they've had a blow to the head or whatever, what are your 3 words? And then I'll follow up with that. And I'll do some other things too to screen for that, obviously. But that's one. And there has been a time where he couldn't remember his 3 words. He didn't know what I was even talking about. So I knew then, like, okay, this is a problem and we need to follow up more closely with that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you recommend, so that's kind of my own baseline testing. That's very crude, but
yeah, that's a great idea. Any parent can do that, right?
Right.
Yeah. Like any parent can do that. They don't have to have a degree or initials behind their name. You just give their kid 3 words.
Yeah.
And kind of pound it into them a little bit and do what you just said. That's a great idea. I'm
Yeah.
going to steal that.
Yeah, feel free to have it. So that's something you mentioned, that you do some baseline testing. Here in Utah, actually, for football, they just made it a law that you have to have baseline testing before the football season starts, which I'm excited about. So actually, my landlord here at our office, he is a state senator, and he helped us pass that. So really excited about that. Yeah. So he has a background in athletic training, so he was pretty motivated to get that one pushed through. But is that something that for other sports, so football, like I said, takes kind of some of the heat for concussions. Is that something that you would recommend getting baseline testing for any child athlete?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you can make a case that even you and I need it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we drive cars.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
So yeah, you can make a case for that. But yeah, definitely, for sure. If you are involved in sports, or you should say, if your kid is involved in sports, like for less than the cost of what you're paying for the shoes for that sport, you can get a baseline test, right?
Yeah.
Some schools provide it. There are definitely baseline tests that are better and have more detail to them and are more that's what I'm looking for, more definitive and more in depth, right?
Yeah.
And then there's some that are really a little bit too simple,
right?
But do something, right?
Yeah.
You should be getting the test once a year as your kid is growing. And so for anybody that's your kids are going into that, it's like getting your yearly physical. Just get it done.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's an important thing to do. If you have it done, then you have that peace of mind of knowing like we can intervene more quickly and be more sure of what we're doing because we have this done.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's great. What are then some of the types of things that you do to help kids that have had a concussion? You mentioned a couple of things, but kind of what's the normal protocol for somebody that comes in with a concussion?
Yeah, so when we test, we test several areas of our brain. If you think about it, think of everything our brain does, like literally millions of things, right? So it helps us think, it helps us read, it helps us balance, it helps us process data and information that comes in. And so when we do our testing, we try to test our brain from different angles to try to identify what areas might be affected. The two stories I gave you earlier both had different areas. They both had the concussion, but they were both being affected in different places and different activities, different areas. And so the testing helps dial down what area we need to focus our efforts. So in answer to your question, getting to that is let's say for sake of argument through that testing, we find that there's a balance deficit. Really interesting research shows that within the first few months after a concussion, the risk of a lower extremity injury is higher. So I need an ankle, right? So obviously there's got to be something there that's, to show that statistically that you can booger up your knee or your ankle after a concussion says there's got to be something going on, right?
Right.
So, we assess that balance and so there's a balance and vestibular exercises that we do here in the office that we'll challenge the patient with. And then there's things that we'll challenge them with that they have to do at home as part of their homework. And it's really it's really been interesting to see how as we progress people, it's almost like you have to start to stimulate that system and force that system to do more and more, but you can't go overboard. So it's kind of figuring out what that fine line is. How can we push and challenge, but not over challenge?
Right. Yeah. Do you talk a lot with your patients then about cognitive fatigue? I know that's something I used to talk with my stroke folks with quite a bit of. We want to push you when it's time to push you, but when it's time to rest, it's time to rest. So that, like you were talking about, we don't want to push you to the point that we've overdone it and you're having to recover mentally.
Right.
Yeah.
So like returning to school, trying to get with the parents and the school. Okay, how can we make some accommodations? Maybe we start out with 2 hours a day. Maybe we start out with 4 hours a day, or maybe there's certain classes that are harder. So, for example, a really AP calculus class.
Right.
Maybe we're going to get them in some of their easier classes before we jump back into AP calculus, or something of that nature. And so, how do we start to just push a little bit, but not push too much? The other thing that's really, really helpful is, sometimes people are told rest.
Right.
And really, that's not always the best advice, because there's a lot of research that shows, I use the term relative rest, meaning.
Yeah, I do too.
we need to be doing some activity, and there's some really good studies that show that that we need to be doing some activity. So I'll a lot of times just have my patients start by going for walks, 20-minute walk. And as you know, our nerves love movement and love blood.
Yep.
Okay. So by going for that walk, that gets our movement going, that gets some blood flow going, as long as we don't, overdo it. We're
Right.
going to go run a 10K the first day or something. So
Right.
getting some blood flow, getting some
Right.
oxygenation of our neurons in our brain, and getting that stuff going.
Right. So I'm a big believer that our body responds to what we tell it to do. And if we tell it to sit on the couch, it'll be really good at sitting on the couch. If we get up and move, then it'll respond in kind and it'll repair the things that it needs to be able to move effectively. And the same thing with our neurological system. If we're not using it, then it's not going to maintain itself. The problem is if we overdo it to the point where we need recovery, especially when it's got an insult where it can't really keep up with recovery, then we kind of not necessarily do harm, but we don't make the progress that we otherwise would, and we can kind of slow things down. Is that, you feel like that's the same with concussion?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's we use the term a lot in our office. Motion is lotion.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So it's all about how do we start to challenge things but not overdo,
Mm-hmm.
and figuring out what that fine line is, and it works. I mean,
Yeah.
It works physiologically, and people feel better, and it's we get people being more active and mobile, and it's a pretty neat thing to be able to do.
Awesome. So is kind of a take-home message for parents. What would you say are kind of those, major pearls of wisdom in terms of what to look for signs and symptoms of concussion, so that they know when to take them in to somebody like you?
Yeah. So, let's face it, kids aren't always so good at describing things.
Right.
So things where you notice that your child is acting differently. Are they a kid that never complains of a headache and now they're complaining of a headache? Or are they, is their personality just a little bit off? Personality is a little bit funny. If they're, complaining that they're feeling a little foggy, or, you give them the 3 words that, that they can't remember, that's a really good idea. And sensitivity to light, sensitivity to noise, anything like that, fogginess, headaches. I've had one young man who had gone to a birthday party. He'd gotten injured, didn't really feel injured, but then he went to a birthday party with noise and commotion and all of that stuff. And then just things kind of really, really ramped up from that point. So if you have an episode that seems something like that, then it's the time you need to go, hey, you know what, maybe we better get this checked out. And obviously it's a lot better to be safe than sorry,
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
you suspect something, let's get it looked at. One other thing, in addition to your 3-word idea, which I love, something that's simple that any parent can do, is this, and it's a really simple test where you take, do I have a pen? Dang, I don't have a pen on me, Cameron. Take the tip of a pen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to turn sideways so you can see what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so when we look at objects, our eyeballs have to be able to, oh, I got a pen. Never mind.
Look at that.
One of my staff was gracious enough to bring me one. So what we do is when we look at an object, our eyeballs have to be able to go in like this and come back out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so a really simple thing, and you could do, any parent could do this, is have your child take a pen. You able to see me okay here?
Yeah. Yep.
Take the pen, look at the tip of the pen, bring it up as close as you can, and when it starts to go double, which it should go double at a certain point, when it goes double, you stop. Measure that distance from the tip of the nose to the tip of the pen. Okay.
Okay.
On average, that distance should be about 6 centimeters, give or take.
Okay.
Okay. So if you do that, and instead of 6 centimeters, it's say 12, or I've had people as many as 30 centimeters away, which is a foot.
Yeah.
Then, so if we're not getting, and 6 centimeters is an average, not everybody's going to be exactly 6.
Sure.
You should be able to get this up to about 6 centimeters when it goes double. Okay. And for anybody watching today, just after the video is done, test that theory out and see what yours is.
Yeah.
But something very simple. It's not a foolproof test, but it's one of the tests that we use, and it's really simple to do, and it's easy to do in your house and requires no equipment.
Yeah. That's a good kind of baseline to have with your kid. Like, where are they at normally? Because they might have vision problems or other things that kind of impact that. But yeah, that's a good baseline to have, that you can say, okay, just had a fall playing basketball or whatever, caught an elbow. Where are they at?
Yep.
And so, yeah, that's awesome. I love having things like that we can use to give parents. What other resources then would you recommend for parents that are concerned about concussions or that suspect their kids might have a concussion? Are there online resources or things people can check out that are credible resources, not just Wikipedia?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website we've got a lot of information on there, is kansasconcussion.com.
Okay.
So that's one place. From that website, we've got some podcasts on there as well.
Awesome.
That we talk about a lot of the stuff that you and I have just been chatting about. And then we've also got some YouTube videos that are linked to from there that talk about that. So that's a good play. That's a good resource. There's a couple of companies that that provide resources for health professionals, but that they have articles and links for parents to go to.
Oh, awesome.
And so that would be, you can't do your test, you'd have to go through a health professional to get your testing done at these places I'm going to tell you about, but they have good scientific data and good knowledgeable data. And one of those is called it's called Concussion Vital Signs, concussionvitalsigns.com.
Okay.
Got some good stuff on there.
Awesome.
And the other one is called Impact, IMPACT. And so both of those are companies that we work with that do neurocognitive testing.
Yeah.
And they've got a lot of good stuff on there for parents.
Awesome. Those are great resources. Hopefully we'll put a link in there somewhere, maybe in the comments below or whatever, to those resources and to your website and everything. Because I saw your vodcast or your podcast there on your website as well. A lot of great stuff about concussions. So yeah, exciting stuff. Definitely glad that you're doing that, helping parents out there in your area, and that we can kind of share this with parents here in Utah at the other WSU, right?
That's right.
So really excited though that you're doing this. It's so fun to hear what other people are doing across the country to help families and help people be safer and more healthy. Sounds like you do a lot of other stuff with physical therapy as well to keep people moving and active and healthy. So
absolutely.
Awesome.
It's what we need to do.
Yep. Well, it's been wonderful talking with you. This is Cody Barnett with Bodyworx Physical Therapy in Kansas, and Cameron Garber with Body Smart. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you later.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Body Smart podcast. Join us in the Body Smart community on Facebook to share your successes or ask a question for our next episode. Now get out there and take the next step toward living your active lifestyle.